reincarnation, transmigration, past lives, rebirth, and soul memory. These and more are ideas which presuppose the existence of a soul and that the soul itself possesses some measure of immortality, capable of inhabiting multiple physical bodies through time. This is a central tenet of religions like Hinduism and Buddhism. Supporters of this idea believe that these lives influence current behaviors, phobias, deep connections to places, and can even show up in recurring dreams. Join us today in The Wandering Crow as we explore experiences from people who remembered their own past lives.
There is a medicine story that tells of Crow's fascination with her own shadow. She kept looking at it, pecking at it until her shadow woke up and became alive. Then Crow's shadow ate her. Crow is dead Crow now. Join us as we attempt to look through the wandering crow's eye to find the gateway to the supernatural, to seek to know the unknowable mysteries of creation. Welcome to the Wandering Crow podcast.
Hello, murderers and wanderers. This is Mandy.
This is Abby.
And this is JT.
JT, who is this beautiful person you have with you?
Well, today we have a special guest who just so happens to be my beautiful wife and partner.
Down.
She is here to give us some stories.
Rachel. Did I
forget to say Rachel?
He says wife, and I think he just assumes everybody knows who that is.
Rachel. Sorry.
So, Rachel also happens to be one of my closest friends, and we're so very excited because, as you could probably tell from the intro, we're going to be talking about past lives. And Rachel, one of the very first things I think you ever told me as I was getting to know you was this experience that you had where you actually had past life regression and got to know about that, which is just amazing. And so I know that this flow is maybe going to be a little strange, but what we were hoping to do is you, the listener, we're going to give you some examples of past life stories that have come up through history, things that we found. And then at the end, we're going to ask Rachel to really spill the beans and tell us all about her own past lives and any questions that we come up with along the way. So Rachel's here with us for the show. She's going to be listening to these stories too. And then we're going to get to hear all about her.
Yay, Rachel.
Yay.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Welcome.
Yay.
So before we get into story time, it is social media time.
If you are a big fan, which we know you are because you're listening, don't forget to subscribe, download the episodes, comment, and leave a review. Please give us a 5-star rating. If you have a story you want to share, you can reach out to us in many ways. We have social media, we have an email address, and all the links are available in our show notes.
Thank you for that, JT. And now, back to the show. All right, and we're back. And JT, what are you sharing with us?
I've heard a lot of these stories of children remembering a past life when they're young. So I did a little bit of research into that and found that there are two guys. There's a psychiatrist by the name of Ian Stevenson. He collected over 2,500 cases of these children talking about their past lives. And then he has a successor, Jim Tucker, at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies. And they both have books, and he has kind of taken on the investigation from Ian Stevenson. They found that these children, they are generally from the ages of 2 to 5 years old, and typically those memories fade by the time they are 6 or 7. They often describe specific names, places, occupations, family members, and causes of death from a previous life, sometimes including details unknown to their current family. In stronger cases, investigators verify the statements against records of a deceased person who died shortly before the child's birth. Common patterns include phobias or strong emotions tied to remembered manner of death. I have a couple of stories This is James Lettinger. As a toddler in Louisiana, James began having intense nightmares about a plane crashing and burning. He repeatedly described being a World War II pilot named James, who flew a Corsair from an aircraft carrier and was shot down over Iwo Jima and couldn't escape the cockpit. He named specific details like the ship, the USS Natoma Bay, squadron mates, and events that matched the lives of James Houston Jr., a pilot killed in 1945. His parents initially were skeptical, but they documented the statements and later confirmed many details through military records and interviews with veterans. And then Jim Tucker, he said this is one of the most compelling cases he has found. Another one that I found interesting is Ryan Hammonds. At around age 4, Ryan from the Midwest began talking about life in Hollywood as a talent agent or extra. He described a man named Marty Martin, who had 3 wives, lived in a big house, and died after his heart exploded. He provided names, addresses, and other specifics. Investigation linked this to Marty Martin, a Hollywood agent who died in 1964. Ryan also recognized photos and recalled details like a specific car and studio work that aligned with Martin's life. And so Jim Tucker has a book called Return to Life with many, many more stories like this. But I just find this fascinating. Like, what other evidence do you need that reincarnation is a thing when you have children remembering specific lives of people that you can find that existed in the past?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, for real. Mic drop.
In my investigation, too, there was just other times where kids would just, look at their mom and say, "Oh, I picked you. I picked you as my mother." And the mother would ask, "Well, how did you come to be here?" And he's like, "Well, I was up above and it came down on a string." And she goes, "But how did you end up being here?" She's like, "Well, I came into you through the top of your head." And he traced himself down to her belly.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
He remembers entering her body and entering his own body in her belly. Another one is a kid who said, "Oh, I chose my parents. We actually talked before I came down, and you guys came down before I did, and we lived in a big castle in the sky. And then I came down by basically jumping from the castle wall and into this life." So just very similar things like that these kids had found. And so those were the 2 most compelling stories. I had lots more, but in the interest of time, I'm going to stop there.
It reminds me of when they had met the parents and the parents came down first and then the kid. That very much reminds me of soul contract that gets talked about sometimes, is that you enter into the contracts with specific purpose in mind for this life or some goal or some lesson that has to be learned. It's pretty compelling. And then a couple of the stories that I had read talked about, well, I met God and God said hello, and then God shoved me down back into the world. And I just think that that's kind of funny because it kind of reminds me of what you were just talking about. And it also reminds me of the near-death experiences where they had to kick her ass back into her body.
Yeah, where the uncle like, "Get in there. Get back in your body."
Not your time.
Yeah.
The very specific way that the child talks about entering through the top of the head reminds me of a lot of meditations that I hear that are specifically about you leaving your body to astral project or to go and meet with your spirit helpers. And it's always going through that crown chakra or the top of your head. Mm-hmm. Was that familiar to anyone else?
Now that you say it, yeah.
The imagery when he said top of the head, I immediately thought crown chakra, third eye stuff.
Speaking of crazy ways that the soul enters the woman's body, I have a story. Okay, so this comes from a book.
Nice segue.
Yeah. When I read this, it gave me the big fucking creeps, and I think that you guys will all feel similarly. So, okay, this comes from a book. There's a whole bunch of them. It's called A Collection of Fascinating True Stories: Past Lives, True Stories of Reincarnation, Journey of Souls by Rachel J. Hopkins. Not our Rachel, different Rachel. And each chapter is a different person's experience. So this one is from chapter 1. It's called Ahmet Delibalta. So Ahmet Delibalta was born in Adana, Turkey in 1936. He was an Orthodox Muslim, and so although he had one wife already with whom he had 3 children, he then took another wife. In his professional life, he was a businessman at heart, and he owned a nightclub and a bakery. As a result of his successful businesses, he now lived in a nice big house. In the 1960s, he went one day to the capital city of Turkey, which is Istanbul, to search there for a new singer to work at his nightclub. On his flight home, the plane he was traveling in crashed to the mountains of Toros. Naturally, it was assumed that all passengers on board had been killed on impact. However, it took days for the rescue workers to reach the crash site because of its very isolated location. To the shock of the rescue workers, when they did get there, they discovered that not all of the passengers had died immediately, and that some had been alive for hours, if not days, before they finally died due to the conditions.
Ew.
Among them was our businessman, Ahmet. His brother identified him as one of the victims from items of clothing found at the scene. He was unable to bring himself to view the body. However, what no one knew until later was that he'd wrongly identified a passenger, or rather, the clothing that he had identified belonged to his now deceased brother, but the morgue believed the clothing belonged to a different victim, so the body was wrongly buried with the name of his brother. When his brother's body was actually found, he was carrying an ID card, and it was then that the mistake was uncovered, resulting in the other man's body being moved from the grave and put in another one. The week before the plane crash, a lady called Latifa Kulich, who lived in the same area as the businessman who had perished, had the most vivid dream. In this dream, she met the deceased businessman. The lady knew who he was, having run into him at his nightclub, although they were not friends, nor had even been introduced. And yet, in her very vivid dream, the businessman had given her a gift and then climbed into her bed.
Whoa.
Excellent.
Yes.
How appropriate. Gosh. Even their souls are creeps.
Yeah, at least this guy. So she was expecting a child with her husband at the time, and she told her husband about the strange dream. A fortnight later, she gave birth, and they discovered she'd had a baby boy. He was child number 14 for the couple.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. So all of that backstory will begin to make sense now. However, as soon as he was old enough to establish his own personality, he appeared to be very different from all of his brothers and sisters. One striking and strange fact was his fear of airplanes. He had a terrible, overwhelming fear of planes. Even just seeing one threw him into terror, or even just hearing one flying across the sky. He would either run straight to his mother screaming or hide under his bed. Another odd thing was that he began to pretend he was the owner of a nightclub. Even though he had never been to a nightclub, he was still just an infant. He would get his brothers and sisters to join in his game, giving them all different roles to play, such as barman or hostess or singer. He was remarkably well organized about it, even laying out the chairs and tables ready for the guests. He told his family he also owned a bakery. As soon as he could talk, he began to tell his mother he was not her son. He asked that she fetch his real mother to come and collect him. He also insisted that his name was Ahmet, not the name she called him. Then, still around age 3, he began to tell her about a plane crash in the mountains. He explained that he had gone by plane to the city to find a new singer for his nightclub. On the journey home, he said his plane had crashed into the mountains. He said he had not been killed because of the plane crash, but that he had died because it was so cold. For the expert researchers into reincarnation and past life cases, this was a particularly pertinent statement because although the newspapers had reported that all passengers had died from the crash, none had pointed out that some had frozen to death while waiting to be rescued and had been alive for some time after the crash. They had in fact died of exposure. This was a fact that only those involved in the search for the wrecked plane were aware of. Then came the next startling revelation. The little boy told his family that after he died, his body had been confused with another person's body.
Whoa.
This again was a fact.
A 3-year-old is saying this?
A 3-year-old is saying this, yeah.
Jeez.
This again was a fact that had been kept quiet as possible and certainly was not out there in the public knowledge because the man's family had been embarrassed that the wrong man had been buried in their brother's burial plot. And so it had not been told to anyone outside of the man's immediate family. And just for context, I happen to know this. In Turkey, burials are very, very quick and very, very private. It's like within a day or two of a person passing, it's done. And they don't even necessarily like hold a wake or like a big ceremony. There's just not any of that. I was shocked to discover that when my own husband had family pass away and we didn't actually know until after they had been buried. It's just, you just get it done. You get them in the ground as soon as possible. So this makes perfect sense. After being taken to the home of the businessman who had died, he immediately named the family members. And after that, he could often be found there, having run off from his house to visit them. When asked what he was doing there, he would always say, "Watching my wives and children." He also revealed that the man he claimed he was had once swapped watches with his friend. When this friend was contacted, it was found to be true. The child had also said that the watch he had given to his friend had his teeth marks on it. Again, the watch given to the friend did indeed bear the now deceased man's teeth marks. This was something that a little boy who lived miles away from the businessman would never have known.
Wow.
Shut up about these teeth marks.
Dude, it's crazy.
So specific.
No, that was great. That was
That was
riveting.
a really good story.
I have one more that I think is like especially creepy. So this is chapter 15 of the same book. It's entitled Mandy Seabrook. Mandy.
So it's about
What?
Mandy, written by Rachel.
Yeah. It is.
Shut up. Okay, that's great.
So Mandy Seabrook was born in the early 70s. Her mother is Jillian. Mandy was born 11 years after the death of an earlier sibling. Although her mother named her after the deceased child, why? She did not tell her about the child. Then,
That's weird.
when Mandy was 2, she started asking her mother, "Why did you cry when I died?" 2-year-old asked this. Her mother was stunned. "We were going to London one time and we passed the graveyard where my daughter had been buried. Manny didn't know about this. She started saying, 'I'm buried there. That's where Mandy is buried.' I said, 'No, you're here.' But she replied, 'Yes, but I was Mandy too.'
Whoa.
It was 100 miles from where they now lived, and she had never been to the graveyard nor driven past it. It was after this that her mother decided to take her to the graveyard and to show them her exact grave. The recognition of the graveyard might be coincidental, as she reasoned, and yet on arriving to the graveyard, Mandy ran straight through the graveyard to the exact burial plot. She also
wow.
asked why she had been buried with a ball, which her mother had placed inside her first daughter's coffin. She even remembered attending her own funeral. She backed her claim by describing it in tiny detail. She asked her mother, "Why did you nearly fall on my grave?" It turns out that it had started raining heavily when she had been buried, and her mother had slipped on the wet, loose earth. She described how 2 people had quickly grabbed hold of her and pulled her up as she slipped. This is the little girl. This is a quote from the little girl. "Everybody had been crying. There's nothing to cry about. I wasn't sent down at the right time." End quote.
Huh.
That's it. That's the whole story.
Wow.
Wow.
Speaking of this whole, like, I was my older sister story, let's talk some soul lingo and some tales about people who meet again from one life to the next. The general concept of soulmate was first toyed with by the Greek comic playwright named Aristophanes, who attended Plato's symposium. It is often wrongly attributed to Plato himself. And he suggested, Aristophanes this is, quote from Wikipedia, that humans were originally androgynous beings with 4 arms, 4 legs, and a single head with 2 faces. Fearing their power, Zeus split them in half with lightning, condemning each to spend their lives searching for its missing counterpart. This was Aristophanes' explanation for human desire for partnership and love. Love being the key magical ingredient that brings 2 souls back together. It wasn't later until the 1800s that a poet actually used the term soulmate in a letter whose name I apparently didn't find important enough to write down. In Celtic spiritual belief, there is something called the Anam Cara, and that literally means soul friends. And according to that spiritual belief, the Martyrology of Angus recounts an incident where Brigid of Kildare counseled a young cleric that anyone without a soul friend is like a body without a head. And within this Celtic spirituality, a soul friend really can mean anyone who is unconditionally compassionate friend. But I suspect it probably goes deeper than that. Outside of this, there's also the belief in a soul group or a soul cluster. And as it sounds, it is the belief that we actually travel through lifetimes as a group. Obviously, the thing that all these terms have in common is that people believe in this idea that there are certain people in their lives now that they actually knew in a previous life too. I actually have a dear friend who I was on a walk with. She has a 1-year-old daughter. And of her 1-year-old daughter, she turned to me and with all seriousness goes, I think she's my mom. To which obviously like the only reasonable response I could possibly give was like, well, damn. I mean, that is a friggin' gift if she is, because now you as her mom in this lifetime are able to give her a chance at a life that she didn't get to live in that last life. And her mom did die before she was able to get pregnant with her daughter. So the whole thing fits. And I'm just like, okay, could be. And there are a ton of other sweet, short anecdotal stories out there similar to that one. So here we go. FYI, these that I'm about to share are all from one master post in Reddit where one person found all of these little stories in comment sections on a popular YouTube series about reincarnation and past lives and soul connections. So here we go. First one. My sister died in 1990 at age 18. I named my daughter after her, Patty. When my daughter was 3, she told me, I used to be Big Patty a long, long time ago. The next year, at age 4, my daughter went into my mother's closet. She pointed to a shirt and said, that was always my favorite shirt. It was the only piece of my sister's clothing that my mother had hanging in her closet. It was indeed my sister's favorite shirt, which is why it was the only one hanging in my mother's closet. My daughter does not recall any of it and is a little spooked.
Wow.
And that brings back that, JT, you mentioned how a lot of people forget the stories late as the years go by.
Yeah.
Next one. I was walking with my youngest to pick up my oldest at school. We were talking when she suddenly said, do you remember when I was your mother? My mother died 9 months before she was born, and she is very much like my mother. A relative sent a picture of my mother at age 10 when my daughter was 10, identical. The next one. When my daughter was 3 to 4, she randomly said, you remember when you were a baby and I would hold you and feed you a bottle? I entertained it and said, oh, were you my mommy? She laughed and said, no, silly. Gigi, which is the mom's mom, Gigi was your mommy. I was Gigi's mommy. She also displays behavior like my grandmother. My grandmother passed away when I was pregnant with my daughter. A couple more short ones. My aunt gave birth to her daughter the same day that my other aunt unexpectedly passed away from an illness she kept to herself. Sad. One day when my cousin was 2, she told my grandma that she remembered being stuck in a box. She could hear my grandma trying to open the box with her hands, but needed some scissors to cut the tape. Once she opened the box, my niece was free and everyone was gathered around on the beach. The only thing was that she was a few days old and there was no possible way she could have remembered that. I'm not even sure what this story just said.
Yeah, I'm lost on this one.
Oh, wait. Hold on. There's more context. Okay. But my grandma started talking about what she said and began to remember struggling to open the urn that contained my aunt's ashes because of the tape. Oh.
Oh,
Oh God. Oh, that's why they're all at the beach. Oh my God, I'm so dumb. I need to just read all the way through. Bright but dumb, everybody. Okay, she just couldn't do it and asked for a pair of scissors. She tried to tear the tape with her fingernails. She just couldn't do it and asked for a pair of scissors and finally got the urn open so that we could scatter her ashes over the sea. There was no way my cousin could have known those details as a few days old baby.
Mhm.
Was it coincidence? Maybe, but my grandma always thought that a part of my aunt's soul went into my cousin's body that day, and it brought her joy to think her daughter was still with us in spirit. When you ask my cousin about it now that she's an adult, she has no recollection of that. She doesn't even remember telling my grandma the story. Okay, what a journey that was. Sorry, everybody. All right, the next one is short. I remember when my son, now 27, was 2. He told me, I lived in a house with a dirt floor and I died in a chair. You were little with a big bow in your hair and a dress on. I think I was your dad. I just sat there freaking out. That's that story. So, I mean, just again and again and again, common denominator, all these kids being born with these very specific memories that can be confirmed by other people in their lives. And they were already someone significant in that person's life.
Mhm.
Now, this last one is weird. I had memories of being someone named Simon and had memories of my sister when she was a toddler and watching over her, even though she's older than me. I told my mom one day with details of a staircase and my sister pointing to me. My mom stopped dead in her tracks and told me my sister had an imaginary friend named Simon, and the house I described was where I was conceived. And one day my sister pointed up and said, "Look, Daddy, it's Simon," to my parents when she was a toddler and always talked about Simon being with her.
Whoa.
Actually, that one is the first time I read it, I was like, wait, he was an imaginary friend to his own sister. I didn't realize that he wasn't born yet. Now it makes sense. So again,
That's weird.
okay, so these are all the stories where it's people who are repeating back into each other's lives. So those probably count as soul groups.
Soul group.
Which is a definition that I did get to talk about in the beginning of this. But when we first discussed as a group going over this topic, JT used the word soul travelers. And when I looked that up, I couldn't find anything using those words or talking about the concept of soul travelers. And so it had me asking him, although maybe a little bit curtly this afternoon, like, what is that? Where have you heard of this? Like, tell me what it is, but quickly.
I might have made that up, that word soul travelers, because Amanda said soul contracts earlier, and that might be more Googleable.
Oh.
I might have said soul travelers because I had an experience when I went through several past life regressions. The reason why I was drawn to the idea of it is because I was randomly in a village in the north part of Kenya in 2019, a village called Nabascal, which is really, really remote from Turkana, which is really remote from Nairobi. So it was, we traveled and we traveled and then we traveled to get to this completely random village. And we were at a tree and there was all of these tribal people that had gathered from their villages and I couldn't see any structures. So imagine I'm in the middle of absolute nowhere, Sahara Desert with a bunch of people with their necks in rings. And there was one person in particular, when I looked at her eyes and my eyes together, I'm like, I know you. And there was like this completely soul connection that I had looking into her eyes. I even have a photo of her. And when I look at that photo, I just feel all of these feelings. So then I started wondering if maybe my food, I discovered in this life that I have kind of a food addiction or food hoarding, or like I'm always worried about running out of food. So then it started occurring to me, did I die? Did I live in that village? I felt like I'd been there before and I knew this one woman specifically, but it was like this weird bonded soul thing. And I've been here. And then I started wondering, did I die here? Did I starve to death out here in Africa? Because when I landed in Africa, I had this thought, I am Africa. Like it was part of my soul. That's what kind of started me on my path of figuring out, what is this about? Because I've had moments in my life, like you were talking about soulmates. And I don't necessarily think I believe in soulmates as in like, oh, JT and I were soulmates, even though we really are very connected and bonded. I don't know that I believe in like one person for everyone, but I do believe that there are people that are part of my group, my soul group. And I, every now and then I run into someone, and I actually believe Amanda and JT might have this connection, because I met Amanda and we connected, but they really have had a soul bond that I can recognize as special. But I've also recognized soul bonds as special just with my own people in my own life.
When we say bond, we're not talking about like a contract. Soul bond, soul contract, are those?
I don't know that I know the exact verbiage, because I'm not as well versed in
Okay.
Hinduism.
In your mind, though, are the concepts in alignment?
The concept of reincarnation, the concept of soul contract, the concept of soulmates, the soul travelers, souls that keep coming back together in different units, in different forms from one life to the next. And you like almost have these people that you're in a contract with. So when I meet someone occasionally, and this, I can probably tell you a handful of people that when I meet them, I feel like I know you and I've known you forever. I also have had experiences throughout my life of like my child, the youngest one, she came 10 years later than that we had wanted her to come. We wanted to have 3 kids, but we wanted them closer together. And there's a 10-year gap, but I always knew that there was this other person that was missing at the dinner table. And I always felt like there was like, I wanted to be done with 2 kids, but there was still another person. And the minute she was born, I'm like, the family's complete. You are here. And Lily's always been special in a way that like, I know she's an old soul. I know that she's an older soul than me, and she teaches me, and she's wise. She's a wise one. And she's always been that, even though she's 14 right now, she's just an old soul. And there's something really special about her. And I know that we were somehow soul bonded, whatever the word is, whatever the terminology is. There are people in my life that I know I knew them. And that's what led me down a journey to figure more out about what was in the past. So because I have this so I was raised in a very high demand religion, and I knew exactly what I believed, and it was all spelled out in books and manuals, and what do I believe about this or that. And then when I decided to leave that faith, I then had this big giant question mark of, well, what do I believe now? And if I get to decide what I get to believe on my own, I always wanted to believe in reincarnation. That sounds really freaking cool. Like, I don't really just want to live one life and then go to the pearly gates and sit around and drink tea with Jesus in white. It doesn't sound nearly as interesting to me as like coming back as another soul or living a different life. So I reached out, I found out about this hypnotherapist, and I decided to book an appointment, and I was super nervous about it because it was walking into a complete unknown. But in the session with the hypnotherapy, the way that I went through it, I did what's called a past life regression. I met with this Dr. Ralph Potter, and you start with going into kind of a trance state. And there's different ways that hypnotherapists will bring you into a trance state, but just simply put, we are all familiar with being in a trance because like you'll drive somewhere, 20 minutes later you're there and you don't really remember the drive. So there's this plane that we're in, and I remember sitting in that chair with a blanket on and thinking I was super comfortable. I was super relaxed. And he just kept talking me down, like from the number 10 to 1, talking me down into just getting very relaxed. So that moment when you're like still lucid and you remember, you know, you're awake, but you're about to go to sleep, that moment is kind of where you're completely aware of what's going on, but you're in a dreamy state. That's the moment. And so you walk down, bring you down into this very relaxed moment. And then he walked me down a set of stairs, the 10th step down to the 9th, 8th, 7th. And then once we got to the final step, I walked through a golden door, opened the door, walked through the golden door, and I was on a platform. And he asked some questions, and it was my first experience. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I could even be hypnotized. So I remember just being kind of in my head with it. And I'm like, I don't know. Am I looking at a movie? And he's like, well, what's coming to your mind? Is it day or night? Oh, it's a day. Oh, it's really cold. Oh my gosh, I'm really cold. And I'm wrapped in something that's, it's like furs. Oh, it's really cold out. And then I could see in the darkness of my hut that there was like a loom, and I was a weaver. And he said, are you a woman or a man? And I said, I don't know. We'll grab a mirror. There are clearly no mirrors right here. He said, do you find any water? So I walked to the edge of a river, and I looked in the water, and I could see all of this red, wavy, curly hair. I imagined Merida from Disney, because the movie Brave, because that was my context for this wild, redheaded, wonderful. But I was a big woman, and it came to me that my name was Eldra. I was like Eldra. It's not a name I've ever spoken before or heard before, but that was my name. And I was like a big woman, kind of like now. I'm still a very like stately woman, strong, stately. But in this life, I was like unattractive. I could see some hairs coming out of moles. I was the age 48 or 49. And I knew I was a Viking. I knew I was a chief. And I knew that I was the one that made all of the decisions for the village. So like
JT,
people would come
fix
to
your
me.
face.
Huh? Fix your face. He said, fix your face. He
He looks
Sorry,
like a
keep
bulldog that's just getting ready to drool. Just looks grumpy all the time.
So he was not excited about me doing this experience, by the way, because back then he was a very believing of that other religion. But I was in the space of being the village chief and warrior, and it is consistent with history that the Vikings really did respect women, and women were chiefs and buried with swords and stuff. But my role in the village was just to like run the show, make sure that everybody had what they needed, make sure that everyone had the pelts that they needed to stay warm, and the hunters would go out and maybe they'll bring home an animal, but I was grinding grain and making hardtack type bread just in case we didn't get meat. And I just had to make sure everybody was fed and that everything was running smoothly. And it was a very stressful life with a lot of sacrifice and responsibility. And then I went to my best memory, which was age 9, and I was running along the bank with a long stick and a little string attached to the stick like a kite. And I was running around like free as a bird, giggling and laughing, and all the kids were chasing me. And so we were having this wonderful, exuberant moment where I was running around being chased by my friends with a stick. That was my best memory. And then my before my death, like the next thing that he led me to is the moments before my death. I was 58. So this would have been 9 or 10 years after my first memory. Nice. And I was sick, and I was in a dark hut, and I was surrounded by a lot of people in the village who clearly loved me. But my last thoughts were, I didn't have any children of my own, and I didn't have a love of my life. And I was very sad to be leaving this life kind of in a loneliness of, I had lots of children around me, lots of people who loved me, but nobody that was mine. So that was a great heartache for me. And then the next moment is he took me into the in-between, or the moment after my death. And I was sitting in what felt like a airport. The best thing I can describe is like a nice lounge, just kind of waiting. And there were other people walking around, but it wasn't like, oh, I know you, or I know you, or I think in my this moment, I believed that I would be surrounded by all of these ancestors that died, and they would bring me in, and I would recognize my grandma and who died, a month before I was born, or I would recognize all these people, but it wasn't like that. It's like I knew people because we're all souls, but I was just kind of hanging out waiting for a while. So then after that first life of Eldra, the Viking, who's Icelandic or Norwegian was what my impression was, I went back through the golden door into another door, and then I was in a wet, cold environment. I was a 27-year-old man, and I was a samurai. I just knew I was a samurai, but I was touching my clothing, and I felt like it was reeds sewn together like armor. And my context, Rachel's context for samurai is like black leather, red, shiny, like weapons,
studded metal.
Yes, like these beautiful, picturesque things like Mulan, right? Disney again. But this time I knew I was in the finest of armor for the village at the time, and it was like 1500s. And I knew I was samurai, and I knew that I was respected, that I was loyal. I had a lot of pride, and I was a watchman, and I was out in this like rice field on a hill, and my job was to look out for danger. My name was Xinjiao. And when my name came to me, it was faster than any other name had ever come to me. And again, Xinjiao, I don't know that name, but that was my name. And I was a watchman. And then I was brought to my best memory, which was at the age 23, which would have been 4 years earlier. I was getting married to the love of my life, my beautiful bride. I knew it was the springtime because I heard birds and I saw blossoms on the trees, and it was just this most beautiful moment of love, like juxtaposed to Eldra, who had no love of her life. Xinjiao had the love of his life, but at 27, I knew that I was far away from my wife, who we had a son at that time, and she was pregnant with what would be a daughter. And when I went to my dying moment of the age 33, and I was killed out on a different hill from the 27-year-old hill, but I was on a different hill, kind of in a different spot, but as watchman, because all I did was I'd leave my village and I would stand watch and like send a message somehow. Like the way that my brain deciphered it is like, that scene in Lord of the Rings where they like light the fire on the hill, and then Miles
chain reaction.
The chain reaction. Like I was the first in line to warn my village of oncoming danger.
Okay.
Well, I was attacked by 3 individuals. I was killed. I was a knife in the back, but it was a sword in my back shoulder, and I was laying there dead. And my last thought was, I had love, I had family, but I didn't get to live my life. It was, again, a life of sacrifice and it was a hard work life, and I didn't get to live it. So what that meant for me in my current moment. So then through the process of seeing these 2 totally different lives, I'm like Viking chief and freaking samurai. How cool is that? It was just 2 totally incredible, different lives. I have since seen that the people that killed me were my mom and my brother.
What?
Yes. I have since seen that they just came upon and they killed me, and they are always in cahoots. I still believe to this day that my mom, her favorite child is my brother. She always picks him over me. And so it's just been kind of like a bad soul contract.
I see. Okay. So the people that killed you as a samurai had the same souls
The soul of my
as
mom
your
and
mom and your brother.
were
Okay.
traveling along. They killed me.
Not that they were mother and son,
No,
like samurai.
No, they weren't mother and
assassins.
son, and they weren't my mom and my brother. They were
Okay.
just souls that came across me, and they actually, in that life, killed me.
Yeah.
Wow.
And one of them made an excuse for the other. My mother made the excuse for my brother and made it okay that he just left me there to die. My last dying thought was, I wonder if anyone will ever discover me, or if the animals will carry off my carcasses. Will my wife ever know what happened, or did I just leave and be left to die? And so in that life, then I went to the next moment in the in-between, and it was more like, remember how I said the first one that I saw, I was in an airport, like a nice Copenhagen lounge airport. This time I was in a dark, kind of wet, felt like a dungeon or a prison. And I had extreme guilt coming over me. And it was because I was someone who had to take lives. I killed a lot of people in the life of Xinjiao because that was my duty, my job. And I was suffering from the guilt of it. And there was no one around. I was alone. And again, just waiting to see what was next. So both of these experiences happened with no previous context religiously to reincarnation, or a lot of the things I saw and names I heard were things I had no context for. So when I went back and I did some research, because we talked about in all of these different stories that, like, the guy whose plane went down, they went back and found an actual guy, James, who had a plane that went down. I went back and I started researching samurai armor of the 1400s. And I sent you a picture today, Amanda.
Stand by.
Visuals of that, of those costumes. So yeah, these are
uniforms.
Yeah. So I saw this when I went into samurai armor, and I was like, that is exactly the type of thing I was wearing, like hand woven armor. But I had Rachel today in my current life have no context of that kind of clothing or armor. It was
like looking at that, I'm not thinking, oh, that's made of bamboo woven together.
Yeah. It was like, it was reeds. And until I saw these photos, I didn't understand what I was wearing, but now I see it.
Yeah.
And it was like the finest armor of the time. And it was the best my village could make for me. But that was kind of crazy. And then I looked up the name Eldra, and it has Icelandic Norwegian origin. And the name Eldred, which is the male version of Eldra, means red-haired wise one.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy. And then the desire to work or occupy your position of authority where you have opportunities to organize an area. Like, it was so crazy when I came across this name.
So Eldra came out of the womb with all that red hair, and they were like,
red hair,
Eldra all the way.
And it tracks with the people of that region. And then we actually, for our family, we went to Sweden, to the northern part of Sweden, and we went to the very first Viking village in Sweden called Birka. And while I was there was a lot of, it felt really like close to home. And that's where we learned that the women were buried. But that was before I had this experience. So then, Abby, you're the one that pokes holes in everything. Like, did I have the context for being a chief because I went to Birka? Or did that life experience lead into just a preparing me for what I was going to see? So I just kind of, I've done a lot of looking back on some of these things, or the things that my daughter went to Japan last year, and I just didn't want to go. I've never wanted to go to Japan, and it's because I was murdered there. Whereas I can't wait to go to Scandinavia, just anywhere in Scandinavia. So anyway, I had those two experiences, which actually led me to recognize some of the traits in myself, the Rachel that is today. I've always been a strong leader. I've always been someone who is highly responsible and kind of managing a lot of other people. And I've also been able to recognize I don't have to be like Eldra had to be responsible of if the village lived or died. I don't have that kind of responsibility, but sometimes in life we think that we're all gonna, like the way that our stress or emotions take us off is related to
it's a good point of reference, a very specific point of reference for it could be worse.
So if somebody is interested in a past life regression or doing something like to look into this deeper, you can find some clarity for your current life. And then I'll just quickly tell you one more thing about the third time I went under. I thought, oh, that was so awesome. I want to go see a couple of cool lives again. Well, the next time I went in for past life regression, it went a little bit different, but I did get to see one more life. And I know that I was in Holland, or we now call it the Netherlands. I had the wooden shoes on. I was a cheesemaker. I was age 62. My name was Alice. And I was on a bridge with my best friend. And the hypnotherapist said, do you recognize anyone here? And my best friend's name was Caroline, and I recognized her as my daughter, Rebecca, like her soul. Aww. So this was the year 1638. And Rebecca, as Caroline, met with Alice, that's me, on a bridge. And we were just best friends, and we made cheese in Holland. And so I have been to the Netherlands a couple of times, and I feel again that I've been here before. This is familiar to me. And I've always been like, I even have a family that's into cheese. My family we're a cheese making family from Delta, Utah. So yeah. We moved to Arizona because my dad wanted to open a Delta Valley cheese store. So really the fact that there's cheese involved is pretty funny. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. Synchronicity.
Yeah. Sidebar. There is a vision of when we were in, do you remember when we were in Pitapulta PTO? Mm-hmm. We went to a little summer stuva, and Lily was running around with a little kite against the fjord or the archipelago. Mm-hmm. And I had this totally ethereal moment of like, oh my gosh, stop time right now. And then later I had this like vision of Elsa. So I don't really get deja vu as a general person, but I've had a couple of moments where I'm like, I've been here before it happened in Bali.
Oh my gosh. Deja vu. What a concept. Oh my gosh. I used to get so much deja vu. So yeah, what do we think the explanation is? Are we trying to connect it with like past life experience?
I've only had my own experiences when I go in and I sit in an office and I intentionally go into this state, right?
Yeah.
But other people talk about dreams or they talk about deja vu. Like my dad used to always have like visions, and then the thing would happen. Oh. And he had some really crazy stuff go on. He never even wore a wedding ring because he had a dream that his finger would get cut off by a machine from his ring. And then it happened. His hand was stuck in a machine. And had he been wearing his wedding ring, he would have lost his finger. There are stories that people have. I think deja vu does sometimes lead to something ethereal, something other than this state or this plane, because
I mean, that sounds like a psychic premonition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
I've had deja vu moments where it's just a specific moment in time where people say a certain phrase or the room looks a specific way, and I've had that dream, and it brings me.
You're
back
like,
to
I've literally
dream.
Been in this exact moment, doing this exact thing before, but like to a T. And it's not, when it comes over you, you're like, it's not the same as just being in a routine and doing it over and over again. Like,
no.
Every detail is exactly reminiscent and the same. Like somebody over there is saying something that happened and blah, blah, all the little variables. That's what I understand deja vu to be and how I've always experienced it. If I were having deja vu things that then I'd be like, okay, I'm psychic.
Yeah, but then that doesn't it start to lead into more conversations about what is clairvoyance and mediumship,
right?
And all these psychics who, that could be a whole nother.
Is it like a little clairvoyance glitch?
Yeah, the psychics that help solve murders and stuff. Like there's a lot of, and I am not trying to convince anyone that that I was a samurai or that I was a Viking warrior woman, because that was for me. That was my moment. That was my life story. So I don't need anybody to believe me that this is what I saw. But the feeling of the things coming out of me in those moments were like, that's not my context. So for me, it was really profound because of names I'd never heard or places I haven't been, but I knew where I was and who I was. And it was just really crazy the way that the visions were kind of popping in. So I loved it. I loved it.
I found all my questions. Some of them you answered already. Were you born with memories of a past life, or did you have an almost immediate awareness? It sounds like if you ever did, that would have been suppressed because of your religion and upbringing, and you just wouldn't know. It wouldn't have been acknowledged.
True story.
And memory is not very good as you get older.
Right.
Even re-listening to I recorded myself talking about this experience, and it was kind of fun to listen to the fresh one today and remember more of the details, because if I were to tell you the story without listening to my fresh one, it would be a little different. So we always change a few details and things, but I was really pleased also to know that some of the really profound, impactful things I still remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a terrible way of remembering. The way that we were taught was like there's a veil of like forgetfulness that comes over people when they come into another life.
Yeah. I've heard that.
Like some kind of a veil. And for some people, the veil is thinner and they can remember more or see more.
It's like the veil.
Right.
It's the veil is the thing that separates us from knowing anything about that soul side or remembering.
Yeah.
Well, when I was doing the research of these children, they're at a specific age that they're remembering some of these past life details, and then they forget them.
Yeah.
And you remember, if you really think back to your first memories, how old were you? 5, 4?
Yeah, older.
Yeah. Like the first.
There's some people. I mean,
3.
and that's that's not typical to everybody, but like
I have memories as a toddler. Like those are my youngest memories.
Same.
Yeah, the idea of the veil or forgetting, kind of.
Well, sometimes we can't remember what we did last week.
Well, true, but but I mean, myself, I thought for a long time I was new. I was a new person in this world. I'd never been anywhere else before until exploring some of this stuff, and I realized that, oh my gosh, Rachel and I were lovers in a past life, and we were separated, and I'd been searching for her for 1,000 years and finally found her in this life.
What a freaking romance novel. Wait a minute. So that's your past life regression tells that story?
No, it's just a
he brought that up.
My own journeying, my own impression, thoughts.
How that ties in is I think he talks more about some of the Native American things like that even Amanda's drawn to, which is Amanda's tried to take us through journeys, and he always can see his spirit guides and the spirit animals, and he's walking down the path and I'm like, I have no idea what's happening right now. So something about that, she's able to lead him through these beautiful journeys, and I just have impressions of stuff, and then I feel like an idiot because I didn't do it right,
But the hypnotherapy, is that what you did?
Yeah, the hypnotherapy
worked better.
So I also think that if you've tried something, maybe try something else if it didn't work for you, because we all can come to our own truths if we want to search and study deeply. Amanda knows a lot about ancient shamanism because she's been studying it and learning about it. And then she teaches us what she's learned. And that's the beautiful thing about everyone bringing their life experience together. And then you can take what somebody says, something that can feel like truth. Like I always get goosebumps when I hear something that feels right or truthful, and then I know when it doesn't settle in. Like that's not truth for me, but I'm really happy that you believe in that. Yeah. And I like to support other people and all their beliefs because we all kind of have a different walk.
So speaking of synchronicity, have you guys been hearing a lot of this or that rhetoric? No, nobody. Okay.
What do you mean?
There's this way of thinking called the this or that way of thinking.
Duality.
But there's more than one way to do things. Oftentimes there's other ways to do things. There's been like a number of wide-ranging content, articles, political rally speeches, tarot readings, where I'm hearing the term this or that thinking, and there's more than one way to do things. And that's essentially what you're preaching to us right now, is that it doesn't have to be this or that, and there is more than one way that are all valid.
When you started on the podcast at the beginning of season 2, you didn't believe in ghosts and some of these things. Like, you were very staunchly I am going to poke holes in this till I die. And now you're starting to believe. I've been just a listener this whole time, but I'm watching your evolution, Abby, as you're learning how to appreciate and open your mind to other things than what you thought was so. And you've had some life experience.
My problem is obviously I came in with an open mind and I was like, all right.
That spirit box, man. But we're all just kind of bumbling around trying to figure out what is this all about and what's the point. And some people will see and hear ghosts more readily, like your neighbor, versus like I don't. The only spirits I've ever felt or seen or are known to me. People like his mom who passed away, my dad who died, have both been very present and taught me things after their death. But I otherwise don't see any spirits, including the ones in our house. But everybody else sees.
Dude, okay. So you don't see the spirits.
So like we all have our different version of veil, like how thin the veil is for us. I don't see the other side of the line, but I believe that it's there. I just don't see it.
How does it sit with you that my spirits, Mandy thinks, are coming to me in the form of monsters that freak me the fuck out in my dreams, but then they're like always on my side and help me?
I think there's something there for you to learn. We're given our shit. Our dreams are also, there's a whole bunch about dream interpretations. My dreams never make any sense, but I can fly. At least I could fly until about 10 years ago. I could just pop up.
Does it look like swimming when you're flying?
No, I stand on the roof and I just pop up and then I'm flying. And it's
okay. So you're like a cool, like Superman.
I can just fly.
Floating flying.
Wherever I need to go, I just fly there, and it's just so
that's
wonderful.
rad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have to bump into anyone. I'm just up there flying around. It's pretty awesome. But I think it has something to do with my free spirit and my open-minded thinking, possibly. I don't know why I can fly, but not everybody flies in their dreams. Some people have more of the horrible, nightmarish things, and mine are always usually pretty rainbows and unicorns.
Mine are always just weird, messed up situations.
Your dreams are
they never make sense.
Fucking strange.
Yeah.
How was it for you, JT, to hear about these past lives? I mean, at the time, you were still in your very high demand religion.
Good question.
Rachel had this experience that like just blew her brain wide open, is kind of what it feels like, and was really impactful for her. As a person who was witnessing that, what was that like for you at that time?
It was like talking to somebody that doesn't necessarily believe in the same politics as you, where you just kind of are like, okay, yeah, that's how you believe. Okay. I don't want to like discount or dismiss the situation. I don't want to be rude or mean or anything, but at the time it wasn't necessarily something that I believed in, but I wasn't closed off to it totally. I was able to listen and be in the moment for her so that it didn't lose any of her excitement in that as well. But it wasn't necessarily something I believed at the time.
Something I recall from then is that, first of all, I didn't tell him I was going to a past life regression until 5 minutes before I left. I was like, and I'm going to do past life regression. Okay, bye. And I left. And then when I told him this story, he was very open to listening, as was another friend, LDS friend of mine. I told them together when I came home. And they were both listening, but both of them, I could tell, were like on edge and didn't believe a word of what I was saying. And it was okay, because I don't need people to believe it. It was for me. And so I was telling him this story because it was so cool. I'm a samurai. Did you know I was a dude before? But he clearly was like kind of closed to it. And so how was the time I told it today was probably the next time you heard the story.
Oh, I'm totally different now. I'm totally open to it now when I realize that I'm not brand new and I've been around for a very long time. I don't know any of my past lives. I've never done a past life regression or anything like that. The only thing I know is that once upon a time in a life long ago, we were lovers, and I finally found you again because I lost you. In that process of learning that through different journeys and and letting go of the thought that there's only one way to believe.
Mm-hmm. This or that. Like if you can let go of that and be open, you might be able to find something new to believe in.
So.
Wow, guys. I love conversations like this. This is why it's nice having a podcast, because you're like, yeah, it's a group of people that I can get really weird and deep with and like feel totally.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Wanderers, it is time to close this episode. This has been a lot of fun. I love, I've heard the stories before, Rachel. I feel like not to this exact detail, but then the extra detail about the Reed samurai outfit, and then you showing me those pictures, that was like, oh, whoa, that was so cool. And I was so happy to be able to share those pictures for you. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I definitely believe that it's possible. I wonder about it. For me, not even a question. Like, this has just been such a fun episode, and hearing stories like these is just very affirming for me. Not like I really necessarily learned anything new, but really cool. I do want to say our next episode is supposed to be magical people who shapeshift, i.e. berserkers, sorcerers, skinwalkers, all of the different kinds of people who do crazy stuff.
Okay.
I expected a little bit more excitement from you, JT. Really? That's what I got?
I can't wait to listen to every time they drop.
I'm so excited to research this one.
There it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like up your alley big time. Weird.
Wish I could find the berserker mushroom and become one myself.
Oh, they're the red and white dot ones that are found in Sweden.
Like, let's do it. We know what they look like.
I feel like you might die.
The berserker eats the red ones with the white dots. You can eat every mushroom at least once.
Yes. Famous Terry Pratchett quote.
I guess, unless the first one kills you.
Exactly. One time. You get one try with each mushroom.
Yep.
Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being our special guest today. I hope you enjoyed this experience.
I did. Thank you for including me.
It was great.
Oh, and I miss Cameron. Cameron, come back. If Cameron listens to this episode, I want to say, miss you.
Yeah.
As a fan that's been listening from the very beginning, multiple times each time, come back.
We do miss Cameron. Yeah. That's, I think, the end of the episode. It was a very unawkward way to do that. I was very smooth right then. I think we can all agree. It was fantastic.
Yes, it was great.
All right. Okay, you ready, everybody? This has been another episode of
The Wandering Crow.
Yay!
All that was missing so long. All that was missing, you.